The stars stretched endlessly across the blackness of space, glittering like tiny fires scattered across a dark ocean. The vast empire that controlled this part of the galaxy had always believed that no other human presence existed here. They had long grown comfortable, confident in their size, their fleets, and their technology. But nothing in their experience had prepared them for what appeared on their sensors one ordinary morning. A BLIP appeared on the Empire's massive radar grid, a shape that should not have been there. At first, the officers assumed it was a malfunction. Equipment sometimes misread cosmic dust clouds or distant asteroids. But as the readings stabilized, it became painfully clear that the object was not only real, it was massive, powerful, and entirely human. Panic rippled through the command center like a shockwave. Officers stared at the screens in disbelief. Every indicator screamed the same thing. A human battleship had entered their territory. No one could explain how it had arrived, why it was here, or what it intended to do. Humans in the Empire's history were almost mythological in their absence. They were supposed to be distant, rare, and unthreatening. Yet here it was, cutting through space with precision, almost as if it had been expected. The high-ranking commanders gathered in the Situation Room, their faces tight with tension. The large holographic display above them projected the human ship, a sleek, angular craft that defied the Empire's standard designs. Its metal gleamed even across the void of space, reflecting distant starlight. "This cannot be," muttered one of the senior officers, his voice strained. "How did it get past our outer patrols?" Another voice, cold and sharp, replied, "It moved too fast, too quietly. No detection system caught it until it was nearly inside our borders. Our protocols are useless here. This is ... unprecedented." The discussion quickly turned into chaos. Each officer had a different theory. Some suggested an invasion. Others feared a diplomatic trap. A few even whispered about the return of humans long thought extinct in this region, bringing with them technology far beyond the Empire's comprehension. The uncertainty was almost worse than the threat itself. Meanwhile, aboard the human battleship, everything was calm and deliberate. Every crew member knew their role. Every instrument functioned with precision. There was no panic, no hesitation, no unnecessary chatter. The humans did not need to boast of their power. Their movements alone demonstrated a confidence that unnerved even the Empire's most seasoned officers. Inside the human ship, the bridge was quiet except for the hum of machinery. The crew monitored their surroundings with careful attention, calculating distances, velocities, and potential threats. They had come here for a reason, and that reason did not include reckless violence. Still, they were prepared for anything. Back in the Empire's command center, the mood grew increasingly tense. Every new reading seemed more impossible than the last. The human battleship appeared to anticipate their movements, avoiding detection at key moments and appearing almost at will in locations that should have been impossible to reach so quickly. A young officer leaned forward, pointing at the screen. "It's like they know where we are before we do." The room fell silent. That was exactly the problem. Humans were unpredictable. They did not follow patterns like the Empire's usual opponents. They did not make mistakes in the same way. And worst of all, they did not negotiate, they enforced. The senior commander slammed his fist on the table. "Prepare the fleet. We will intercept it. No human ship enters Imperial space without consequence." Orders were sent instantly. Hundreds of ships mobilized, engines flaring against the void as they attempted to converge on the intruder. From a distance, the Empire's fleet looked unstoppable, an unbroken chain of firepower stretching across the darkness. Yet the human battleship moved with grace, weaving through the incoming forces, never truly threatened, always one step ahead. The first clash seemed inevitable. The Empire's officers anticipated explosions, lasers, and chaos. Instead, the human ship continued on its course, calm, almost indifferent. It made no aggressive moves. It did not fire. And yet, the Empire's commanders felt the weight of its presence like a tangible force pressing against their confidence. "This is unlike anything we faced," whispered another officer, barely audible. "It doesn't behave like a normal enemy. It doesn't react as we expect. And it doesn't fear us." The tension in the room was unbearable. Every officer was forced to confront an uncomfortable truth. Humans were not just another species in the galaxy. They were different, more intelligent, more capable, more disciplined, and perhaps more dangerous than anything the Empire had ever encountered. Outside, the human battleship glided past asteroid fields and orbital debris, analyzing every system, every patrol, and every ship it passed. It was not here to conquer, not yet. It was here to observe, to ensure that the balance of the galaxy did not tilt dangerously toward tyranny. Its presence alone was a warning. Its silence was a statement. Back in the Empire's control center, tension turned into fear. Commanders argued over what action to take next. Some wanted to attack immediately, to strike first and assert dominance. Others cautioned patience, knowing that a misstep could lead to disaster. Hours passed, and the human ship continued its journey, calm and purposeful. Its crew remained disciplined, aware that every decision they made would be scrutinized, and that the eyes of the Empire were upon them. Yet there was no aggression, no rash move, no overreach. Humans did not act without reason. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the Empire's senior commander stood and addressed his officers. "We cannot underestimate them. This is not a regular threat. It is a human battleship, and they do not play by our rules. Prepare for engagement, but understand this. We do not know what we are facing. Every move must be calculated, or we risk total annihilation." The officers nodded, their faces pale, knowing that the galaxy had shifted in a single morning. The arrival of a human battleship had changed everything. Fear, respect, and awe mingled in their hearts. They had faced many enemies before, but none like this. None that moved with such precision, such calm, such undeniable authority. As the human ship drifted silently toward the Empire's inner systems, the message was clear. The galaxy was no longer theirs to command without challenge. The humans were here. They were watching. And the Empire would never see space in the same way again. Outside the command centers, beyond the flickering lights and holographic maps, the stars continued to shine. Space seemed eternal, indifferent to the panic below. Yet the human battleship moved like a shadow across the cosmos, signaling a new era. One where the humans' presence would be felt, not through conquest, but through their calculated, undeniable power. And so, the first part of the story ended not with battle or destruction, but with the quiet, unsettling truth that had shaken an empire to its core. A human had entered their territory, and nothing would ever be the same. The Empire's fleet had been mobilized, their warships forming massive lines in the emptiness of space. From above, it looked like a great river of steel stretching through the stars, engines glowing and weapon systems humming in unison. Yet, despite the overwhelming numbers, the commanders felt a growing unease. Numbers alone did not guarantee victory. Humans, they had learned, did not fight like anyone else. The human battleship moved silently through the void, a solitary shadow threading its way through the Empire's massive fleet. Its design was unfamiliar, unlike anything the Empire had encountered. Sleek, angular, and built for both speed and defense, it was a perfect blend of form and function. Sensors tried to track it, but the ship seemed almost alive, anticipating every movement, adjusting as if it could read the thoughts of those chasing it. Inside the Empire's flagship, officers debated their strategy, voices tight with anxiety. Some advocated immediate attack, believing that overwhelming force could intimidate any opponent. Others argued caution, insisting that humans were clever and unpredictable, and a reckless strike could cost thousands of lives. "We can't just rush them," said one advisor. "Every tactic we've tried is already anticipated. They're too fast, too precise. We need a plan that accounts for that, or we risk losing the entire fleet." The fleet commander's face was grim. He had spent decades commanding vast armadas, calling rebellions, and defeating countless enemies. Yet never had he felt the weight of fear like this. The humans' unpredictability, their calm under observation, unsettled even the most experienced leaders. As the fleet maneuvered, the human ship moved with unerring purpose. It avoided patrol lines with ease, slipping between ships as though they were stationary rocks in space. Every move was calculated, yet not a single offensive action had been taken. It was almost as if the ship existed in a different rhythm from the Empire's vessels, immune to panic, immune to fear. Meanwhile, aboard the human ship, the crew worked in perfect harmony. Each officer knew their role, and every decision was deliberate. Sensors scanned the Empire's ships constantly, measuring power output, tracking weapon readiness, and analyzing the patterns of movement. Every detail mattered. The humans had a mission, and that mission required restraint, observation, and strategic positioning. In the Empire's fleet, frustration began to grow. Officers shouted orders, recalculating formations, attempting to predict the human ship's trajectory. Every adjustment seemed futile. The humans were always a step ahead, appearing where no one expected and disappearing from places where they were visible only moments before. "You see this?" an officer asked, pointing at a holographic display. "We've surrounded them on 3 sides, and yet they've slipped past again. How is that possible?" The commander shook his head. "It's not just speed or stealth. They think differently. They don't follow patterns we can exploit. They don't make mistakes. We've never faced an enemy like this." Panic began to spread among the lower-ranking officers. They had grown accustomed to predictable enemies, ones who responded to tactics in familiar ways. Humans did not respond predictably. Humans did not panic. Humans did not follow the rules of war. The Empire had learned to exploit. The young officers whispered nervously among themselves, fear shining in their eyes. Every report from the sensors, every unexpected movement, added to their growing dread. Humans were supposed to be long gone from this sector, mere stories in old history books. Yet here they were, moving through the Empire's space like ghosts, untouchable and unstoppable. Back on the human ship, the captain observed the fleet quietly. There was no rush, no unnecessary displays of power. The humans were in no hurry to fight. Their presence alone was a message. They wanted the Empire to see them, to understand that humans were not to be underestimated, that they moved with purpose and intelligence, not chaos. The Empire tried everything it knew. Fighters were sent to intercept, missiles were launched, scanning pulses intensified, and decoys were deployed to trap the human ship. Yet every attempt failed. Fighters found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Missiles were calculated and avoided without evasive maneuvers that might have hinted at their intentions. The humans never fired first, but they had made it clear that they could if necessary. The Empire's flagship commander realized that the human ship's power was not just in technology, but in intellect. The humans understood strategy in a way the Empire could not fully predict. They were patient, disciplined, and efficient. Every movement was measured, every decision calculated, every encounter controlled. Inside the fleet's command center, arguments escalated. Some officers argued that retreat was the only safe option. Others insisted that showing weakness would invite further intrusion. The tension was unbearable. For the first time in the Empire's history, numbers alone could not guarantee dominance. As the hours passed, It became clear that the humans were not attacking, yet they were in control of the situation. Their calm, calculated presence had thrown the Empire into disarray. Communication lines buzzed with anxiety. Officers shouted over one another, and the usual order of command began to crumble under the pressure. On the human ship, there was no triumph in observing the Empire's panic. They did not celebrate. They did not gloat. Their mission was simple: monitor, assess, and ensure that no unilateral aggression destabilized the region. Yet the humans knew the effect they had. They understood how their mere presence challenged the Empire's perception of control, how it created doubt, fear, and uncertainty among those who had always felt invincible. The Empire's fleet attempted to converge again, forming a tighter perimeter, but the human ship simply adjusted its course. It moved with elegance, weaving through obstacles and creating distance where the Empire hoped to close the gap. Every maneuver reinforced a single undeniable fact: the humans were in command, even without firing a single shot. "Every move we make, they're already ahead," an officer whispered, his voice shaking. "We don't even understand how they think." "How do you fight someone like that?" The commander's jaw tightened. He knew the truth in those words. The humans had created a new kind of warfare, one that relied not on overwhelming numbers or brute force, but on intelligence, anticipation, and patience. And the Empire had never been tested in that way before. As the fleet regrouped, orders flew across every channel. Officers double-checked calculations, attempted new strategies, and tried to anticipate the human ship's next move. Yet every new plan seemed flawed, already accounted for by the humans. It was as though they were playing a game the Empire had not even learned the rules for yet. The humans continued their journey, moving through the Empire's territory with purpose. They scanned key areas, gathered data, and positioned themselves strategically. Every action was deliberate, and every decision reinforced their dominance without a single act of violence. The Empire began to understand that fear was not just a response. It was a weapon the humans wielded silently. By existing in their space, by refusing to act recklessly, the humans had already gained the upper hand. They had forced the Empire to question itself, to doubt its strategies, and to reconsider what it meant to control the galaxy. And so, in the silence of space, the human battleship continued its mission. Calm, deliberate, and impossibly precise, it moved like a shadow among the stars. The Empire, despite all its power and resources, had been forced to react, to observe, and to admit, silently, that humans were a force unlike any they had faced. For the Empire, the realization was both humbling and terrifying. Their vast fleets, their technology, and their centuries of rule suddenly seemed fragile. One ship, unmoved by fear or emotion, had changed everything. And for the humans, their journey continued with quiet purpose. There was no need for confrontation, no rush for dominance. They had arrived to observe, to understand, and to ensure balance in a galaxy that had long forgotten what humans could accomplish. In that moment, the stage was set. The Empire had begun to panic, and the humans were already moving through the darkness, calm, precise, and impossible to ignore. The second part of the story ended not in battle, but in tension. The human strategy was clear, their presence undeniable, and the Empire's confusion absolute. Space had become a silent chessboard, and humans had already proven themselves masters of the game. The human battleship moved steadily through the Empire's territory, its presence a quiet warning that everything the Empire thought it knew about control was no longer true. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, but the emptiness of space felt charged with tension. For the Empire, every blip on the radar, every flicker of light from the human ship, was a reminder that they were being watched by a force they could not fully understand. Inside the Empire's flagship, the atmosphere was tense. Officers paced back and forth, their eyes glued to the displays. Every calculation had been rechecked multiple times, yet the human ship continued to defy prediction. The fleet commander, normally composed and confident, found himself rubbing his temples as frustration mounted. "We need to communicate with them," one officer suggested cautiously. "If we can establish contact, maybe we can understand their intentions." The idea was controversial. The Empire rarely communicated with unknown human forces. Diplomacy was not a tool they associated with humans. They were seen as either myth or obsolete. But the humans in front of them had already broken the rules of the galaxy. Silence was no longer an option. After a tense pause, the commander gave the order. A communication channel was opened, a stream of signals directed at the human ship. The message was formal, cautious, and filled with a subtle undertone of authority. They wanted answers, yet they feared provoking a force they could not predict. The response was immediate and unlike anything the Empire expected. A calm, measured voice came through the channel, speaking in perfect Imperial standard, yet with a tone that carried both authority and clarity. The humans were aware of every fleet formation, every maneuver, and every attempt at deception. They did not challenge aggressively, but their words carried weight. They had observed, they had assessed, and they had a purpose. The Empire's officers were stunned. No one had expected humans to respond in such a manner, to communicate with confidence and precision. Even more unnerving was what the humans said next. They were not here to conquer, not to attack without cause. Their mission was to observe, to monitor the balance of power, and to ensure that no single faction could dominate the galaxy unchecked. A senior officer, usually quick to dismiss human legends as mere stories, whispered to a colleague, "They're not here to fight, but it feels like they could destroy us if they wanted." The commander leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the human battleship. "Exactly. They don't need to attack. Their presence alone is enough to make us reconsider every move we've ever planned." The humans explained their reasoning calmly. They had been tracking patterns of expansion and aggression within the Empire for decades. Their arrival was not sudden, it was calculated. They moved silently, gathering information, observing weak points, and testing the Empire's readiness. Their actions were precise, disciplined, and strategic. Despite the lack of overt aggression, the Empire's fleet remained on high alert. Every ship scanned constantly, every system monitored, every crew member tense. The humans' ability to avoid confrontation while demonstrating power was unsettling. It forced the Empire to confront its own vulnerabilities, something they were unaccustomed to. The young officers, observing the exchange, could hardly believe what they were witnessing. Humans were supposed to be rare, almost extinct in this sector, yet here they were, commanding attention and respect without firing a single shot. They did not shout orders. They did not deploy massive firepower. They simply existed, and that existence alone altered the balance of power. On the human ship, the crew remained disciplined and focused. They did not gloat over the Empire's confusion or relish the fear they had instilled. Their mission was simple: to observe, assess, and maintain balance. Their presence was a warning, not a threat. But it was understood that if provoked, their capabilities would make confrontation catastrophic. The communication continued. The humans responding with clarity and logic, answering questions, but never yielding any information that could be used against them. Every word reinforced their position as an unpredictable force, intelligent and disciplined beyond the Empire's expectations. Meanwhile, the Empire's commanders debated what to do next. Should they attempt an attack now, or should they try to negotiate further? Every officer knew that a wrong decision could be disastrous. The humans were capable of unimaginable precision, yet they had given no indication of hostility. Every scenario seemed fraught with risk. Some officers argued for retreat, citing the humans' intelligence and discipline. We cannot outmatch them with brute force, one argued. Any engagement could result in massive losses. We need a strategy that doesn't rely on overwhelming numbers alone. Others insisted that hesitation would be seen as weakness. If we allow them to operate freely, they will dictate the terms of this entire sector. We cannot give them that power without a fight. The commander weighed both sides. Understanding that the humans had already achieved something remarkable, they had forced the Empire into a state of uncertainty and caution. Their calm and deliberate actions had turned what should have been a straightforward show of power into a complex, tense situation where the Empire no longer controlled the narrative dot in space. The human ship continued to move with purpose. It scanned critical systems, observing military installations, trade routes, and patrol patterns. Every action was strategic, yet subtle. They never drew unnecessary attention. They never fired weapons. They were, in every sense, a shadow moving through the galaxy, an unseen force that reminded everyone of what humans could achieve when intelligence and discipline were combined. Back in the Empire's command center, tension reached a new peak. Officers argued, recalculated, and predicted, yet the humans remained one step ahead. Their calm confidence contrasted sharply with the chaos of the Empire's fleet, making every maneuver, every decision feel heavier. More critical dot, it became clear that the humans' goal was not domination, but control through observation. They sought to maintain balance, to ensure that no single empire or faction could grow too powerful. Their presence was a challenge to the Empire's assumptions, forcing leaders to rethink strategy, behavior, and perception. The human battleship moved closer to key strategic points, demonstrating capability without aggression. Its sensors scanned, its communications observed, its presence a reminder that humans were not just survivors, they were masters of strategic influence. The Empire's officers could only watch, trying to anticipate moves that were already anticipated. Hours passed, and the tension only grew. The human strategy was clear. They did not need to engage directly to assert dominance. Their intelligence, discipline, and calm had already shifted the balance. The Empire had been forced into a reactive state, every action measured and cautious, every decision influenced by the silent presence of humans in their space. Finally, after long hours of observation, the human ship made a subtle move. It repositioned itself near a critical sector, not threatening directly, but showing that it could reach key points at will. The Empire's fleet, despite its size and power, was forced to acknowledge the humans' control of the situation. In the command center, the atmosphere was heavy with unease. Officers whispered, debated, and reevaluated. Humans were no longer a distant legend. They were here, intelligent, disciplined, and untouchable in ways the Empire had never encountered. The very concept of power, control, and strategy had shifted in a single encounter. The humans had communicated not with threats, but with authority. They had displayed no aggression, yet they had unsettled the entire Empire. Their intelligence and precision had done more than any weapon could. They had turned presence into power, calm into influence, and observation into dominance. As night fell across distant planets, and stars twinkled in silence, the human ship continued its mission. It moved with deliberate precision, aware of every observation and every reaction from the Empire. Their goal was not conquest, yet their presence ensured that no empire could act recklessly without consequence. The third part of the story ended with a subtle but powerful truth. Humans did not need to fight to demonstrate their influence. Through communication, observation, and strategy, they had forced a vast, confident empire to question everything it believed about power. The galaxy had shifted in an instant, and the Empire's sense of control had been challenged in a way no fleet or weapon could undo. Humans had arrived. They had communicated. And the Empire, despite all its fleets and power, had begun to understand that their presence was not a threat in the conventional sense. It was something far more unsettling, far more intelligent, and far more effective. News of the human battleship's presence spread quickly through the Empire's capital. Messages flashed across communication networks, arriving at every command post, government office, and military station. The initial disbelief soon turned into shock, and then into panic. Citizens, officials, and military leaders alike struggled to comprehend what was happening. The Empire, long confident in its unchallenged control, had suddenly been forced to face a threat that was unlike any they had ever known. In the halls of the capital, officials moved quickly, trying to assess the situation. Holographic screens displayed the human battleship's movements, showing it calmly navigating the Empire's territory while avoiding confrontation. Every display of its speed, precision, and discipline left leaders uneasy. They were facing a force that could act unpredictably, efficiently, and intelligently, all without firing a single weapon. At the High Council, debates raged. Some leaders called for immediate military action, arguing that humans could not be allowed to roam freely in Imperial space. Others advised caution, warning that a direct confrontation might result in catastrophic losses. Their discussions were heated, voices raised in fear, frustration, and disbelief. "This is not just another ship," one advisor said, pointing to the display. "It moves with intelligence. It anticipates our actions. This is a human vessel, and humans are not like any other species we've encountered. We cannot underestimate them." A senior council member leaned back in his chair, his face pale. "We cannot attack them blindly. They do not behave predictably. Every move we make, they are already one step ahead. We need to think carefully, or we risk the Empire itself." Meanwhile, in the capital streets, citizens reacted with confusion and fear. Rumors spread faster than official reports. Stories of humans, long thought extinct or insignificant in this sector, caused a mix of awe and terror. Propaganda departments scrambled to control the narrative, trying to maintain calm and prevent mass panic. Flyers, broadcasts, and public announcements painted the humans as a mystery powerful, intelligent, and unpredictable. But the underlying fear was impossible to hide. Military advisors warned the council repeatedly. "This is not a conventional threat. We cannot rely on standard tactics or sheer numbers. Humans think differently. They do not follow predictable patterns. Every encounter could turn against us if we act without caution." A council struggled to find a solution. Some suggested attempts at communication, while others insisted on preparing the fleet for a show of force. The tension in the room was palpable, each decision weighed with potential disaster. For the first time in centuries, the Empire faced a challenge it could not dominate with wealth, numbers, or technology alone. High above the capital, satellites monitored the human ship as it moved closer to strategic points. Each movement was deliberate, calculated, and perfectly executed. It did not fire weapons. It did not engage in combat. Yet every action created a ripple of unease throughout the Empire. Its presence alone was enough to unsettle generals, officers, and citizens alike. The human ship's calm efficiency contrasted sharply with the chaos below. In the capital, advisors argued over potential strategies, debated the humans' capabilities, and worried about the consequences of every possible move. The humans were forcing them to confront uncertainty, a concept they were not used to managing. In the council chambers, one officer finally spoke up, his voice trembling slightly. "We have underestimated humans for too long. We have assumed that their presence here is impossible. Yet here they are. They have arrived without warning, without demand, and without aggression. And we cannot even predict their next move." The senior council member nodded slowly. "Exactly. They are a mirror to our own weaknesses. Their strategy is subtle, yet effective. They have done what no fleet, no weapon, no political maneuver has ever accomplished. They have made us question everything we thought we knew about control. Outside, in the capital streets, people watched the sky and wondered about the humans. Stories spread of ships that could outthink entire fleets, of beings capable of intelligence and strategy far beyond the Empire's understanding. Fear mixed with admiration, creating a strange tension among citizens who had always believed their empire was invincible. Back in space, the human ship continued its observation. It approached critical areas, scanned communication arrays, monitored fleet movements, and measured defensive capabilities. Its actions were methodical and precise, reinforcing the impression that it could exert influence without direct conflict. The humans were demonstrating power through strategy, discipline, and presence alone. The Empire, despite its size and resources, was forced to react. Every fleet movement, every deployment of forces, every recalculation of tactics was influenced by the humans' presence. The humans had created a situation where the Empire no longer controlled events. They were responding to them. As tension grew, the Council considered more drastic measures. Some suggested setting traps, deploying decoys, or even attempting to isolate the human ship. Others warned that such actions would play into the humans' strength, patience, observation, and anticipation. Every idea was weighed, tested, and dismissed or reconsidered. But no consensus emerged. The human ship moved calmly through space, observing silently, aware of the Empire's reaction, but never responding with hostility. Its presence was a quiet reminder that power could exist without aggression, that intelligence could dominate without force, and that restraint could be more effective than destruction. In the capital, the Council began to realize that their panic was not just fear, it was a symptom of something far larger. The humans were teaching them, in effect, that control was not about numbers or weapons. Control was about strategy, foresight, and understanding. And in this lesson, the Empire was unprepared. Officers in the capital's military command discussed logistics, fleet positioning, and potential outcomes. Every scenario accounted for human intelligence, adaptability, and restraint. Each time, they realized the humans had anticipated moves they hadn't even considered. It was a humbling, frightening realization. Meanwhile, the human ship, like a shadow gliding across the stars, continued its mission. Its crew monitored, calculated, and assessed. They did not engage unless necessary, yet their presence alone had disrupted the entire Empire. They moved with calm efficiency, showing that intelligence and discipline could achieve what fleets and weapons never could. As the day progressed, the Council's debates continued. Some officers advocated diplomacy, others insisted on preparing for the worst. Each discussion was a reminder of the human's subtle power, the ability to command attention, influence behavior, and create uncertainty without ever firing a shot. Finally, the Council came to a tentative conclusion. They could not attack recklessly. They could not underestimate the humans. They could not ignore them. The human ship had forced a new reality upon the Empire. A single vessel, moving with intelligence and restraint, could challenge centuries of assumed dominance. The human strategy had succeeded. Without engaging in battle, without showing hostility, they had forced the Empire to reconsider everything. The military, the government, and even the citizens had been shaken. The Empire's confidence had been challenged in a way no weapon or fleet could have achieved. As night fell across the capital, the stars continued to shine. The human ship moved silently, observing, assessing, and influencing without ever firing a weapon. Its presence was a reminder that power could be subtle, strategy could be dominant, and intelligence could shape outcomes in ways that brute force never could. The Empire had begun to understand that humans were not a threat in the conventional sense. They were something far more dangerous, far more intelligent, and far more capable. Their calm, deliberate actions had turned fear into influence, uncertainty into control, and observation into power dot. And so, the story of the humans' arrival in the Empire's territory continued. Their presence had shaken a vast civilization, not through violence, but through strategy, intelligence, and discipline. The Empire had been forced to reconsider everything, and the humans remained calm, focused, and untouchable, moving like shadows across the stars, and leaving an indelible mark on the galaxy. The fourth part ended with the Empire's capital in turmoil, its leaders uncertain, and its citizens uneasy. The humans had not fought, yet they had conquered in their own way, through the subtle, undeniable power of presence, observation, and intellect. The Empire had begun to stabilize after the initial panic, but the tension in the capital and across the fleet was still palpable. Leaders, officers, and citizens alike understood that the human battleship had changed everything. Its presence had forced them to reconsider strategies, capabilities, and even the assumptions on which their power was built. But while fear had settled into a grudging respect, the Empire could not remain passive. They needed a plan, a way to regain control and assert dominance over their own territory. In the Fleet Command Center, officers worked tirelessly, analyzing every movement of the human ship. The display screens showed their fleet formations, patrol patterns, and defensive positions. Calculations were made, simulations run, and contingencies prepared. The Empire knew that brute force alone would not be enough. Humans were clever, unpredictable, and disciplined in ways no other species had ever been. Every move had to be precise, every strategy flawless. Converge on Sector 9, the fleet commander ordered, his voice steady but edged with tension. Deploy fighters in coordinated formations. Launch decoys to confuse sensors and draw them into a trap. We must anticipate every possible move. Officers nodded, setting the complex maneuvers into motion. Thousands of ships moved in synchronized precision, engines flaring against the darkness of space. Yet the human battleship, calm and unhurried, adjusted its course effortlessly. It anticipated the Empire's plans, slipping through gaps, avoiding traps, and monitoring every attempt at deception. Inside the human ship, the crew observed quietly. They had anticipated potential countermeasures, tracking the Empire's fleet patterns and predicting reactions with remarkable accuracy. There was no panic, no haste. Every maneuver was deliberate, every calculation precise. The humans' mission was not to fight unnecessarily, but to maintain control through observation, strategy, and influence. The first attempted ambush came without warning. A group of Empire fighters swooped in from the edge of a nebula, hoping to catch the human ship in a narrow corridor. Missiles were launched, scanning beams activated, and alarms blared across the Empire fleet. Yet the human ship adjusted its course with precision, dodging every projectile with grace and efficiency. The fighters were left stunned, unable to comprehend how a single vessel could evade such coordinated attacks. "It's impossible," an officer whispered, staring at the display. Every simulation said this should have worked. How are they predicting our moves? The commander's jaw tightened. It's not prediction. They understand strategy. They understand patterns. And they anticipate mistakes we haven't even made yet. This is beyond anything we've faced. The Empire regrouped, determined not to allow the humans to dictate the flow of events. They deployed larger squadrons, hoping that sheer numbers could overwhelm intelligence. Entire wings of warships converged, firing in coordinated volleys designed to box in the human ship. Sensors tracked every movement, calculating speed, trajectory, and reaction times. And yet, the humans remained calm. They moved through the oncoming ships like water flowing around stones, slipping through the most complex traps with a fluidity that defied expectation. Not once did they attack first, Not once did they show aggression beyond what was necessary to maintain distance and awareness. Their presence alone was already shaping the Empire's strategy. Meanwhile, back in the Empire's capital, political tension grew. News of the fleet's maneuvers spread quickly, and advisors debated the effectiveness of their strategies. Some argued that the humans could be reasoned with, suggesting diplomacy as a way to reduce risk. Others insisted that any sign of weakness would embolden the humans further. Retreat is not an option, one officer warned. If we allow them freedom of movement, they will dictate the rules of engagement for the entire sector. We must demonstrate control, even if we cannot defeat them directly. The Council understood the dilemma. The humans had forced the Empire into a reactive position. Every action the fleet took was measured against potential responses that the humans had already considered. It was a new kind of warfare, one that relied on patience, observation, and anticipation rather than direct confrontation. Back in space, the human ship continued its strategic path. It observed key points, analyzed patrol patterns, and recorded data on fleet movements. Its goal was not to destroy, but to maintain balance. Every maneuver was deliberate, reinforcing the idea that intelligence and discipline could wield power more effectively than weapons alone. The Empire tried again, this time using electronic interference to disrupt sensors, hoping to hide the human ship long enough to gain a tactical advantage. But the humans anticipated these moves, adapting instantly. They countered interference with subtle adjustments, maintaining awareness while leaving the Empire frustrated and exhausted. Officers muttered under their breath, frustration evident in every command. How can one ship control so much? How can they be everywhere, yet nowhere at the same time? The fleet commander's expression was grim. It's not just control, it's influence. They are teaching us that our fleets, our numbers, our weapons, none of it matters if we do not understand strategy. And that is something humans excel at. As the battle, or rather, the strategic engagement continued, the Empire realized that direct confrontation would be costly. Every attempt to trap or corner the human ship was met with precise evasion, every plan anticipated and nullified. The humans were reshaping the very definition of power. Presence, patience, and observation had become their greatest weapons. The humans moved closer to critical installations, yet never attacked. Each move was a silent message. They could act if necessary, but they preferred control without conflict. The Empire's fleet, despite its size and firepower, could do nothing but react. Every deployment, every maneuver, was dictated by anticipation of the humans' next move. In the capital, Council members grew uneasy. They realized that the humans' influence extended beyond physical control. The psychological effect on the Empire was profound. Leaders were second-guessing decisions, officers were hesitant, and even citizens were uneasy. The humans had achieved dominance not through destruction, but through presence, intellect, and discipline. Meanwhile, the human ship continued its mission with calm determination. Every decision, every course adjustment, and every observation reinforced their strategy. They were proving that influence could be more powerful than any weapon. That discipline could outmatch brute force. And that patience could achieve what aggression never could. Finally, the Empire's commanders acknowledged an uncomfortable truth. They could not predict the humans. They could not control them, and direct confrontation would likely result in disaster. The humans had demonstrated superiority without firing a single shot, reshaping the Empire's understanding of strategy. Power and influence, the Empire attempted to regroup, to recalibrate, to plan for a longer-term engagement. They deployed additional reconnaissance ships, adjusted fleet formations, and developed contingency plans for multiple scenarios. But each move had to be measured, cautious, and carefully considered. Humans had forced the Empire to become reactive, and the lesson was clear: patience, intelligence, An observation could dominate even the largest fleets. As night fell across distant sectors, the human ship moved silently, observing, monitoring, and influencing events without aggression. The Empire's fleet, despite its size, had been forced into a defensive posture. Its leaders knew that any rash action could result in massive losses. The humans had achieved dominance not through combat, but through discipline, strategy, and presence alone. In the capital, officials debated next steps. Diplomacy, caution, and observation were all considered. No one suggested direct attack anymore, for the cost was too high and the likelihood of success too low. The humans had created a situation in which the Empire had lost its usual control. Every decision, every strategy, and every calculation was now shaped by the presence of a single human battleship. And so, the fifth part of the story ended with the Empire forced to rethink everything. Its fleets remained powerful, its leaders experienced, and its resources vast, but humans had demonstrated a different kind of power. Control through intelligence, discipline, and strategic observation was a force the Empire had not prepared for. The humans had not attacked, yet they had won. They had not fired weapons, yet they had reshaped the Empire's strategy, forcing it into hesitation and uncertainty. Their calm, deliberate actions had proven that influence, intelligence, and patience could achieve what fleets and armies never could. The stage was set for the final confrontation, or perhaps the final lesson. The humans were in control, and the Empire was learning slowly and painfully that power in the galaxy could no longer be measured only by numbers or firepower. The galaxy had changed. The Empire, once confident in its absolute control over space and its countless fleets, now faced a reality it had never imagined. The human battleship had moved silently through their territory, not with aggression, but with intelligence, discipline, and authority. Its presence alone had unsettled entire fleets, shaken the council in the capital, and forced the Empire to rethink what power truly meant. In the command centers, officers studied the human ship's movements one last time before it would leave this sector. They had tried traps, coordinated attacks, and electronic interference. Each attempt had failed. Every maneuver the humans had made was precise, every action deliberate, and every outcome anticipated. The Empire's leaders had begun to understand that this was not just a ship, it was a symbol of human strategy, patience, and intelligence. The humans themselves did not celebrate. Their mission was not conquest, and their goal was not to dominate through fear. They had arrived to observe, to assess, and to ensure balance in a galaxy that had forgotten caution. They had tested the Empire, but they had also shown restraint. Every decision was measured, every move considered, and every observation carefully recorded. Back in the capital, the council convened to discuss the aftermath. There was no anger, no outrage, only a mix of awe, frustration, and reluctant respect. The humans had forced the Empire to recognize its limitations, to confront uncertainty, and to adapt to a new kind of strategy that relied not on sheer force, but on intellect, patience, and influence. We underestimated them, one council member admitted, his voice low. We assumed humans were rare, insignificant, and predictable. And yet here they are, shaping our decisions, forcing us to act cautiously, and showing that strategy can be more powerful than fleets. Another officer nodded. They did not attack. They did not fire a single weapon. And yet they have changed everything. We are no longer in control, at least not in the way we used to be. Their presence has forced us to reconsider every assumption about power. Across the Empire, fleets began to adjust to this new reality. Ships were repositioned, patrol routes altered, and strategies rewritten. The human ship had moved like a shadow through their territory, teaching lessons without speaking them, demonstrating power without aggression. Its influence extended far beyond the immediate physical presence. It had forced the Empire to rethink strategy. Command and control. On board the human battleship, the crew monitored the Empire's response quietly. They had observed fleets, recorded patterns, and noted weaknesses, not to exploit them immediately, but to ensure that the balance of power remained stable. Their mission was not to destroy, but to prevent unchecked aggression. The humans had arrived to remind the galaxy that intelligence and restraint could wield power more effectively than weapons or numbers. As the hours passed, the humans continued their path through key sectors. They approached critical installations, not with weapons drawn, but with sensors active, scanning communications, fleet movements, and defensive systems. Each action reinforced a singular message. Humans could dominate, not through fear, but through precision, patience, and observation. Meanwhile, the Empire attempted to maintain control. Officers calculated, simulated, and strategized, but each plan had to consider the humans' next move. The humans' presence had forced them into a constant state of vigilance and adaptation. Every deployment, every maneuver, every decision was influenced by a single ship that had never engaged in direct combat. Citizens, hearing news of the human ship's actions, reacted with mixed emotions. Some were frightened, fearing a species whose power and intelligence seemed unmatched. Others were awed, realizing that humans were capable of remarkable discipline and strategy. Rumors and stories spread across planets, creating a new sense of respect for a species that had been thought irrelevant or extinct in this sector. In the Empire's council chambers, debates continued. Diplomacy, caution, and observation were discussed in great detail. Direct attack was no longer considered viable. The humans' intelligence and foresight made any aggressive approach too risky. Instead, the council focused on understanding, anticipating, and adapting. For the first time, the Empire recognized that power was not only measured by ships, weapons, or numbers. It was measured by intelligence, strategy, and presence. The human battleship, moving calmly through the stars, approached the edge of the Empire's territory. Its mission was almost complete. Every system had been observed, every fleet pattern analyzed, every communication scanned. Yet, despite their thoroughness, the humans had not engaged in violence. They had proven that influence could surpass aggression, that restraint could command respect, and that intelligence could challenge even the largest empires. As the ship prepared to leave, a final communication was sent to the Empire's command centers. It was concise, calm, and deliberate, a reminder that humans were watching, that they were aware, and that their presence could always return if necessary. It was a subtle warning, a lesson delivered not through destruction, but through intellect and strategic foresight. The Empire, despite its vast fleets and resources, acknowledged the message. Leaders understood that the galaxy had shifted. Humans were not just observers. They were a force capable of shaping events without firing a single shot. Their strategy, patience, and discipline had forced the Empire to adapt, to reconsider, and to respect a power it could not fully comprehend. In the silence of space, the human battleship moved onward. Its engines glowed faintly against the darkness, its sensors active, its mission complete. It had tested the Empire, observed, and influenced, all without aggression. Its presence was a statement. Intelligence, strategy, and patience could achieve what fleets and weapons never could. Back in the Empire's capital, officers, officials, and citizens alike reflected on what had occurred. The human ship had left, but its impact remained. Fleets had been repositioned, strategies rewritten, and leadership had been forced to confront humility. For the first time, the Empire understood that control was not guaranteed by size, technology, or numbers. It was determined by foresight, intelligence, and restraint. The humans' journey through imperial territory was now a story told across systems, a tale of calm authority, precise strategy, and influence achieved without combat. In every sector, the lesson was clear. Humans were not to be underestimated. Their power lay not in weapons or numbers, but in intelligence, discipline, and the ability to shape outcomes without aggression. The Empire, once confident and unchallenged, had learned a new kind of respect. Its fleets, though still vast, were now guided by caution and awareness. Its leaders, though still proud, were now humbled by the demonstration of a force they could not predict. And its citizens, though still loyal, now recognized that the galaxy contained beings capable of extraordinary intelligence and restraint. As the human battleship disappeared into the vastness of space, its mission complete, the Empire settled into a new reality. The galaxy was larger, more complex, and far more uncertain than anyone had imagined. Humans were no longer distant myths. They were real, intelligent, and capable of reshaping events without firing a single shot. And so, the sixth part of the story ended not with battle, not with destruction, but with a profound shift in the galaxy's balance. The humans had arrived, demonstrated power, and left a lasting impact through strategy, discipline, and presence alone. The Empire had survived, but it would never see space or itself the same way again. The stars continued to shine, endless and indifferent. Yet one ship had left a shadow across the galaxy that would be remembered for generations. A reminder that true power could exist in calmness, intelligence, and the quiet precision of those who understood that control was not taken, it was earned through foresight, patience, and strategic mastery.